Hello, everyone. I'm going to start this lesson a little bit differently with a game of sorts. And I'm going to show you a couple of images, hold them up, and one of them keeps going to my vaccination card. I want you to take a look at this image, and it's the image of a clown. You know what? It's automatically forwarding, I think is what it's doing. It keeps going to my vaccination card, and you don't need to see that. Try this again. Why it keeps forwarding. And so I want you to tell me what you see. Look it over. Do you see a happy clown or do you see a sad clown? What if I do this? It looks like a happy clown, right? You see the happy face, but then if I put, if I turn it over the other way, it's a sad clown, right? So this image, it's the same image, but depending on how you look at it, it looks different. So your perceptions, how you perceive things, how your eyes see things and take in information, that can change what you think you're seeing. You may not actually be seeing what you think you're seeing. So let me bring up another one here. Why it keeps doing that? Guess I'm vaccinated. All right. So some of you may have seen this image before, but driving me nuts. I want you to same thing, like look at this and what do you see? You probably see a vase and sort of imagine some flowers on the top of it. What if I flip it upside down? You might still see a vase. I see a vase. It almost looks like a planter that I might have out in my deck. Something is wrong with my photo viewer here. But if you look at it a little bit differently, can you see something else? What if you focus on the white part instead of the black part? If you sort of move your eyes around, change your vision, it's like those things where there's lots of little dots and like you focus and it just looks like nothing, it looks like a bunch of color, but if you unfocus your eyes, you can see picture. That sort of reminds me of this. So if you just change your perspective and change how you sort of perceive it, tell me if you can see something else. Something else that's in here is faces. There's two people looking at each other. So if I was going to point with the pointer, but I won't because it might forward it to my vaccination card again. But if you look at the black part, right, and you focus on the black part looks like a vase. But if you look at the white part, the empty space, can you see the faces? There's sort of the nose, two faces in profile looking at each other with the nose in the middle. They have their mouths open. Actually, one of them has a little bit more of a bottom lip than the other. The one on the right has more of a lip. The one on the left doesn't have a bottom lip. But basically, it's two faces looking at each other. So there's two ways to see this same image. So how we perceive things can really influence how our brains process and sort of how we see the world. It isn't always black and white, like, right, this was a black and white image. But just because we see something doesn't mean there's not something else there that we aren't seeing. So this has to, let me unshare my screen here. So the point of that has to do with the story that I'm going to read today. And it's about perception and how we perceive people and how we first perceive someone may not really reflect who they really are. So the story that we're going to read is about a tax collector. Now you may recall that last week we talked about tax collectors and we talked about how they're viewed by society and how they were treated. And so tax collectors were hired by the Romans to collect taxes in Palestine, and they were generally disliked by people. And because they got their pay from the taxes they collected, they were often considered by those they taxed to be corrupt, because who wants to have their money taken away from them, right, even for taxes? So they're sort of looked down upon in general. So today's story is about a different tax collector. This was a chief tax collector named Zacchaeus, whom Jesus befriended. So first, we're going to start with a meditation that puts you in the shoes of Zacchaeus. So close your eyes if you want. Make sure you're comfortable. Hopefully you're in your quiet location. And feel free to close your eyes or just put your computer screen. Well, you can't put your computer screen down because you hear me, but turn it around if you want. And relax. Take some deep breaths. Now imagine a tree. Notice its bark. It's very rough bark. The leaves, they might be fluttering a little bit if this is wind blowing. The trunk reaching up tall. Now look up into the branches and you see a low branch that's within your reach. You reach up, stretching, and grab hold of the branch. Feel the rough bark of the branch in your hand. Pull yourself up and you feel the strain of lifting yourself in your arms. You reach for the next branch and then the next, and as you climb, you feel the leaves brushing against your clothes and skin. You see a big branch way up high, strong enough to support you. You move out on top of it and stop and look around. Above you, there's more branches. Below you, there is a crowd of people milling about. No one is looking at you. No one notices you. They're too busy pushing and straining to see something or someone in the center of the crowd. From where you sit, you can see him clearly. It's Jesus, and he's talking with the people around him. He's smiling, and the crowd is moving with him while he walks. No one notices you in the crowd, but Jesus is coming your way. Suddenly, as if Jesus senses you are there, he looks up into the tree. He sees you and smiles. He beckons to you and says, "Climb down from there. I'm coming to your house today." As you climb down from the tree, you feel the eyes of the crowd on you. You can imagine what they're thinking. They're probably thinking, "Why is Jesus going to that person's house? Why not my house? Doesn't Jesus know who that is?" Your heart is beating really fast. You don't want to face the crowd, but when you reach the ground, Jesus is there smiling at you. You leave the crowds behind, and together you walk towards your house. So go ahead and open up your eyes if you had them closed. Turn that computer screen back around. And think about how you felt up in that tree alone, just watching the other people. And how did it feel when Jesus noticed you and then spoke to you? You might not want to face that crowd, right? Because they hadn't been maybe they hadn't been nice to you. And imagine what you would do if Jesus was actually going to your house. And what do you think you would do? You show him your room, something to eat, introduce him to your family. But imagine how Zacchaeus must have felt when Jesus spoke to him. So I'm going to read to you what actually happened to Zacchaeus when Jesus did speak to him. And this is from Luke chapter 19, verses 1 through 9. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through town. A man there named Zacchaeus, a ruler among tax collectors, was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he couldn't because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed up a sycamore tree, so he could see Jesus, who was about to pass that way. When Jesus came to that spot, he looked up and said, "Zacchaeus, come down at once. I must stay in your home today." So Zacchaeus came down at once, happy to welcome Jesus. Everyone who saw this grumbled, saying, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." Zacchaeus stopped and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anyone, I repay them 4 times as much." Jesus said to him, "Today, salvation has come to this household because he too is a son of Abraham." So how did people react when Jesus approached Zacchaeus? And why? They were upset, right? They were thought, this isn't right, because they saw Zacchaeus as a tax collector who, and because he was a tax collector, well, he must automatically be corrupt and a sinner and a bad person. So they're saying, well, is Jesus approaching this corrupt sinner? Now, think about people in society today who might be thought of that way, that it's assumed they're a bad person because of what they do or what they look like maybe people that have been committed crimes, or arms dealers, or gang leaders. These are people that people sort of look down on society. But just because, even if they have sinned, they still deserve forgiveness. And a lot of these people too, like if you think about poor people, that people look down on society, like we talked about last week, that they haven't actually done anything wrong, right? They just have bad circumstances, but we still tend to look down upon. And so this crowd looked down upon this tax collector just because he was a tax collector. And so that's why they were upset when Jesus went and spoke to him, and they didn't understand. So we often judge people unfairly in society, right? So it might not be because of what they do. Tax collector, I don't know. I think the present day version of that may be maybe politicians. We don't look very kindly upon our politicians, and some politicians that do some not great things. They have to make a lot of compromises, which we can't often, as outsiders, often can't appreciate. But there's also some good politicians too. If you see someone walking down the street and let's say their hair is all ratty and their clothes are all dirty and ripped, you might judge them and think, oh, they must not have much money. They must not be very hardworking, right? They must be lazy. But you don't know what their story is. You don't know what they're going through. And frankly, just because maybe they're someone who was visiting MDI for the summer and has lots of money, but they had just come from this really long hike, and so they look sort of gross. And you just didn't know that. So you can't always know what people actually are just by looking at them. But you also, even no matter who this person is and what they have done in the past, it's still not for us to judge them. So just like the clown face in that vase, it's all how you look at things, right? You might not see, you look at that image of the vase and it looks like a vase, but you might not see right away that those faces are there, but they were there hidden all the same. Just like when you look at a person, you see something, your brain automatically takes in certain information, but you might not see what else is really there behind that person. Just like the people in the story of Zacchaeus, they might not have seen Zacchaeus for who he really was. They just didn't make an assumption because he was a tax collector, but Jesus reached out to him all the same. So that's all for today. Have a great week. I'll see you next time.